Hey, everybody. I am very excited to bring you a very fun and educational episode this week. But before we get into the topic, I have our review of the week. So this review says, eye-opening. This pod has given me much needed insight into my own sex life, as well as answered a few uncomfortable questions I had about myself. I strongly recommend everyone listen to this podcast because the host will absolutely give you every bit of insight you will need and is not afraid to dig into the uncomfortable or taboo things. Thank you so much for the review, and you're correct. We are not afraid to jump into the taboo topics here. So this week I have a guest. Her name is Mariah Freya, and she is the owner and founder of Beducated. So we're going to be getting into what that means, and we're going to talk specifically to you today about vulva owners and orgasm and female pleasure and all sorts of good things. So welcome, Mariah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yay. Thank you for having me, Heather.
Yeah. And so there's kind of a fun story that Mariah and I met each other in 2016 in Barcelona. How random is that, you guys? So we were both at entrepreneur nomad conference, and it was before I was a therapist, but I wasn't a sex therapist. And I was like, who is this lady with this cool sex business? Let's find out all about that. Mariah, could you tell people how did you start this, and what made you sort of be brave enough, I think, to go in this direction?
Yeah, I remember back then when we met at this conference in Barcelona, I still had my Orgasmic Discourses podcast. You won't believe it. So that was before the time when podcasting was really mainstream. And I remember only 3 or 4 sex podcasts existed back then. And I remember I listened to this talk, and someone said, yeah, and if you want to really nail the podcast thing, you have to perfectly cut everything and make it perfect in terms of the audio and the style, and everything needs to be scripted and perfect. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to quit my podcast for sure. So I literally, at that conference, I stopped. I decided not to continue my podcast because back then, I had a couple of views and it was fine, but it wasn't such a big deal thing back then. And I think mostly geeks were listening to, some of the digital nomad and entrepreneurial podcasts. But that was it. So you couldn't really reach a wider audience. So for me, it didn't really make sense to continue.
I could see that.
So I'm rethinking about the story, which is fun to think about. What would have happened if I continue? But I'm now even happier, to be here in your podcast talking about my business. And I think what made me, start Beducated was definitely my own self-exploration, my own journey with my sex life. I wanted to become a social worker. I wanted to,
interesting.
In a sort of naive and little girl's way, change the world by helping people somehow. I always thought about, okay, what type of tools are out there that empower people? Because I somehow didn't really feel very empowered, even though I grew up in Germany in a democratic society where you'd say it's equal more or less, which is still to certain parts definitely not, but I had definitely more rights than other women in this world, more privileges as well. I realized still I have all these potential open doors, but I didn't really feel like I'm really able to use them and able to step up my game and really feel my powers and know my superpowers and just be confident. And that kind of had this type of belief I had in all parts in my life, and especially also in my sex life. Rather on the low libido end, not really interested, not really somehow the fire, where you have that inner fire, that inner passion that you need for a great next project or, great sex, amazing orgasms. It's like if that's missing in like a red line throughout all parts in your life, it's kind of like you're on a low volume, right? So when I discovered, together with my partner, who's still my husband, also business partner of today, and also father of my 2 kids.
Cool.
We're together since over 16 years this year, so it's really a long time. When we started realizing that, sex life was turning meh over after a couple of years in our relationship. We were like, okay, there must be somehow another way. He's the type of personality that's always looking for a solution, always trying to, okay, is there something new, something interesting that he can learn? So he kind of brought this impulse into my life of like learning and lifelong learning pretty much. I'd say he has somewhat the natural fire that I didn't have back then. And then on that journey together, we accidentally got this course recommended on a vulva massage. And that was for me like the first touch point of just something entirely different, something unexpected, something new. And like it made me really excited to try it out. So that was sort of the opening door for me to first of all realize, okay, I'm like, my body is incredible. I'm a orgasmic, which I didn't realize before. Like there's so much mystery that I didn't realize, I could uncover. And that was sort of the turning point for me to realize, okay, I've got to dig into my own sex life. There's something to it. And on the way of that empowerment, that's when I realized, okay, this is my tool I've been searching for, to help people in the world owning their life, owning their sex lives. Yeah, being able to leverage what's inside of them. And I feel like sex is such an amazing leverage and such an amazing empowerment tool to do that, to be able to feel full and energetic and alive and just, that sensual being that we are, allowing ourselves to use our senses and all of that. So that's when I sort of started the business. And today I'm super proud. We're, I think, the biggest online course library in the world. So we have over 100 plus courses with over 40 different sexperts like yourself, from sex therapists to coaches to specialists in kink, tantra, you name it. Like we have quite a diversity and variety of courses that people can choose. And some would say it's like the Netflix for your sex education. So it's sort of like, you plug in and then you just get endless sex education on demand.
It is true. Yeah. I mean, so I was able to log in there, before our call today. And I was just like, oh, wow, they have a bit of everything. And, for me, and I think for a lot of people, like variety is the spice of life, as they say. But I also think variety is the spice of your sex life, and to realize.
Yeah, and just kind of seeing sort of the different tools and ways and fantasies and things you could dig into, like just that realization when you scroll down at Beducated inside the platform. Like it's just such a mind-blowing experience, I think. Just, of course, I could also go to YouPorn, to any porn site, and sort of get like endless content of sex. But the thing is, it's not education. It's like only for consumption, to kind of get
entertain and titillate.
Exactly. And it's not really explained or put into like the diversity of things and sort of the learning curve of it. Right. Plus, on top, of course, having a professional at your side supporting you, being able to navigate through all the steps together. And I think that's just an amazing thing that a lot of our customers say, like, wow, like there's so much diversity, and I haven't even watched it all, like, but sort of tiptoeing into some fantasies that I've been thinking about before, and now I even know how to even make them come true, right?
Yes.
I think that's for a lot the biggest challenge. Like there is maybe that fantasy, but like how to really experience that and make it happen.
Yeah. And I love, first of all, I love hearing your enthusiasm as you're talking about this, because, I do think it means so much when people have had like a personal experience and they've actually transformed. Like, oh, I didn't know I was orgasmic, and now I'm orgasmic. Like, and I can own that. I can like feel the energy in my body differently, just like as I go about my life. That's kind of what excites me, is like, sometimes we just kind of go about our life and things are like, okay, or fine, or whatever. And it's like to delve into sex as sort of a personal growth journey and realizing that not only will you walk away with a better sex life, but you're going to just change how you feel in life in general, I think.
Yeah, I'm super curious to hear also your story on that. I'm sure you shared it already, but
she's turning the tables on me.
Yeah, I mean, every sexpert does have a story why they, end up in that space, and I think every story is unique and should be told for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I mean, part of mine is a little bit similar to yours, like some same, some different. But I, looking back, realized that I was pretty repressed for a while, and I had a lot of anxiety about sex. So some of us are just a little more prone to anxiety in general, but the messaging was, well, this is bad and you shouldn't do it before marriage, but everyone does it. But then also kind of speaking to Beducated, no one tells you how to do it. Nobody tells you how to have fun doing it. They tell you, like, be afraid. Don't ever, like, do anything different than, like, sex when you're married in a monogamous way. And, it's like you could get pregnant. You could ruin your life. You could get this disease. You could get HIV. You could die. And nowhere was it like, hey, this is how your body works. This is
supposed to be fun,
right? Or like there's benefits to sex, right? And there's actual health benefits too. In addition to pleasure is a health benefit, I think. But also it's like your blood flow improves and your lymph system gets supported, and you get oxytocin, and like there's so many wonderful things happening. But like we never kind of got the owner's manual on like genitals specifically.
If we got it, then we got it at a time where we went through probably the craziest hormonal up and down our teenage years, where you anyways not able to grasp it fully and understand everything, because it's just like so turning inwards with everything is wrong with myself. So it's a very difficult time. So having sex education only in that period is already kind of crazy. Like in my opinion, it starts with parents who are already educated, ideally.
Ideally.
Who live pleasure and their sex life, of course, in a way that's healthy for them. So they live that, and children ideally get a sense of intimacy every day, and then from there they start to become teenagers and start asking questions around it, and probably already by then know everything because of the internet. And that's when most parents kind of say, okay, school does that, but then school is like restricted with all the political situations and politics saying, no, you're only allowed to say this and this and that to students. And then so that's limited, and then they have their first sexual experiences growing older and older and having their first real relationships perhaps, but struggling because everybody struggles with it, because
I know
it's taboo in every single country. So how are we managing that? And then like somehow we don't continue educating ourselves, because we think, okay, sex ed is something we put only in that period from, I don't know, 12 to 18 or 21. And then and that's it. But I think it's like the ideal sex education is in especially our 20s, our 30s, when we're like getting a bit more confident, like getting different experiences, negative as well as positive, knowing how to heal those, knowing how to overcome them, how to, use consent and boundary setting to be safe in that very explorative time. In our 20s. If we are surviving that sexually in a positive way, then I think we're pretty set for, more of the relationship period between our 30s and 40s, where it's about kids and all of that. And then there as well, like I'm a mom of two, like I'm definitely struggling with my sex life right now because it is really difficult. So I need the type of education in this period where I'm, understanding how to schedule it better, how to make it still fun, even though I have so little time available. And
that was my last episode, by the way, was scheduling.
Exactly, I saw that. No, it's a great episode, and I think it's really, I call this like sexual life cycle. Like in every part of that life cycle, I need specific education to kind of overcome these challenges that are connected typically to that period. Like later on, I'm gonna experience most probably menopause. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean for me? Or even later, growing older, maybe not being the fittest anymore. What does
Right.
that mean for my sex
Right.
life?
Right.
And so on. So there's so much amazing education out there
There is.
for everyone. And yeah, that's why we decided at Beducated to kind of pull all the information on one platform
Yeah.
to deliver that every step of the way wherever our customers are on their journey. And yeah, I think that's definitely something unique, I'd say.
It is. And I mean, the other thing I want to tell people about it is, I get frustrated as someone who's trying to educate people that, we're censored on social media. I can't even spell the word sex on Instagram. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
there's, Pornhub and other like mainstream porn sites, which are just not educational. Like that's just not where we should be like getting our information. Now, if you want to like use it as it's intended to get off, do you, right?
Yeah, we've been banned twice on Instagram. We've lost our Meta account to advertise twice.
Okay.
Now we've completely given up on actually advertisement.
Yeah.
So we're working with influencers and experts. But yeah, I think people don't realize that there's this restriction for sex education. Like
There
they
really
would
is.
presume that something, freely accessible, which is not. Porn somehow, of course, makes sense for people to kind of shut out of like a more family friendly social media environment. That makes a lot of sense, but it's really tricky to reach a bigger audience with this topic.
But that's why, like, I love that you have your platform, and I'm grateful for podcasting so that I can speak freely and have you on and you can speak freely because, you know, like we need this information. And I think about your video. So the one I had watched about female orgasm, it's like there is a naked woman there and she is touching her vulva. And yet it's not pornographic. It's just like, oh, cool. I can see exactly what's being narrated because so much of what we see online is just like cartoons or porn. And so it's either just like an illustration where it doesn't look like a vulva. And it's nice, I think, to see other vulvas too. Because I think we need to like normalize that, all vulvas look differently. And so I think the course I watched, there was 2 different vulva owners and their vulvas look different. I was like, this is great. This is great. People need to see this.
We have a bit of a spectrum here. So we have some courses that are very more theoretical and where it's maybe more about communication tools just being, just sort of like, hey, do this and use these types of sentences or set it up in a proper way. But then we have more the anatomical or like pleasure-based teachings where we really show pleasure, where we really show also diverse bodies, different types of sexual orientations and genders. So we also have a sensual massage on a non-binary, for example.
Love that.
And we have a erectile dysfunction course, which you just released, where actually 2 men are having a conversation about erectile dysfunction. And then afterwards, it kind of goes more into a edu porn, which is sort of like on the other spectrum, where they are sort of helping each other to stimulate each other and show each other ways how they overcome the erectile dysfunction, but in a pleasure-based way, you know, where it's really about the focus on pleasure, but also still keeping the education in mind. So it's like a spectrum.
I want to go watch all of them now.
Yeah. Well, you definitely need more than a weekend.
But I mean, like for me, and something I talk about on this podcast a decent amount too is, and you mentioned this when your own personal description was sex as a journey, and how there's different life stages. And we're going to also just have periods of time where we have a higher libido and periods where we have a lower libido and periods where we're like, ooh, let's get spiritual and try some tantra. And then we're going to have other periods where we're like, let's get kind of nasty and get into some BDSM stuff, And I just love that variety. And And I think people get stuck a little bit, on like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't know, our sex is
It's very easy
okay.
to get stuck.
Like I get off, or we kind of know each other's bodies well at this point. Or, maybe you're dating and you're single and you're kind of like, we just kind of do like the basics, when it's a new partner.
Yeah.
And so I think we can get stuck with that. And so just to see, like you said, like, oh my gosh, we open it up at the Netflix of sex education and there's like 100 different options. Like, that's cool. So it gets your creative wheels turning, which I think is huge for having a great sex life.
Of course, it takes that little extra nudge of getting a little bit out of your comfort zone, because I think people get stuck within their comfort zone. Like, especially long-term relationships. I know it inside out. In the first couple of years, it's still somewhat exciting because you're still sort of finding new things out about each other. But then it's just like the same old that you just repeat. And that's when you kind of get stuck along your journey. And I feel, especially for me as a vulva owner, having that diversity on like stimulations in a different way, and like from this different angles somehow, emotionally, mentally, and not just physically. I mean, there are definitely a lot of penis owners out there who would probably say the same, but a vulva owner often has more of that, like, different angles, not just the in and out penis and vagina thing. But, I feel like that was for me a really important realization that, hey, like, diversity is really important to get my juices flowing. And so how can we make this happen? And of course, it sort of requires that extra getting out of your comfort zone every time you try something new, because it is, like, the taboo is so ingrained in our system.
Right.
And I still sometimes, like, get stuck, like, speaking out about my desire, just because, it's something that you always need to sort of break through every time. If there's that willingness and that, like, okay, like, I just want to try it. Let's see what happens. And like, if it's not great, let's just stop it.
Right.
Like,
there's just like
a
playful, like the way you're saying that, even it's like, there's just a playful curiosity. It's like, let's just see, So I hope people can adopt that. I wanted to ask also, or just mention to people, I loved how the videos got into like specifics. Cause I feel like, especially when it comes to touching genitals, I feel like we have a communication breakdown, where it's just kind of like, I don't know, just like a little lighter or a little harder, but like to see like, oh, there's like this V finger position and you can kind of like use this exact positioning and technique, and, you can use oil, and here's how you can even pour the oil or rub the oil around. And I was like, this is so good.
We might have gone a little bit German engineering on that stuff. Like 99 different ways on how to touch a vulva.
No, I was like, give me more. This is great. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it depends, sometimes you can get a little almost too brainy on the technique.
For sure.
Where it's, and I think everyone craves that another technique, where sometimes just that presence or that simplicity of just being there and breathing in and out and just holding, just staying there and holding, right, can be such an amazing moment. But for sure, it's exciting to have all the techniques going.
It is, because I think it also gives people like language. So like, it's something you could watch with your partner and then be like, oh, let's try that.
Let's do that.
Yeah, because it's like, I don't know that I would have come up with, the exact words. And as I was watching it, I was like, oh, I've never touched myself in that way, or that's not something I would have thought to request from someone even. So I love that it's giving people ideas like that.
And there's, for example, also that technique of, I can't remember how we named it now, but it's basically you are sort of allowing each other a space where one person gives pleasure and the other actively gives feedback on what feels good and what doesn't, and that you sort of have that extra feedback space, and then once you're kind of out of that space, then there's maybe not necessarily that feedback required anymore, because you just kind of figured out some things in that feedback space. And that way it's not really hurting the partner, because everyone knows, okay, that's not a feedback space, and we're just sort of seeing, okay, how's that? And how's that? Okay, like applying the techniques and then experimenting in that way, because we're often so afraid, aren't we, that to hurt our partner by telling them, oh, that doesn't feel right.
Totally.
Or like I'm faking my orgasm just not to hurt my partner, because I don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation about it, or just to name a couple of examples there.
Yep.
So having like that extra scheduled feedback workshop together is just a really great tool.
I couldn't agree
as
more.
It allows us this like becoming sexperts together, and like I'm sort of starting to become my own sexpert by feeling, okay, what feels good and what doesn't, and then my partner learns that while I'm sort of giving that feedback.
I recommend this to my clients as well, exactly what you just said, because if we're kind of in a sexual scenario where it's just about pleasure and connecting, sometimes we can get attached to that outcome, which I do discourage. I'm like, and I know Beducated is the same way. You had it like right there in writing, like we focus on pleasure rather than orgasm. I was like, yes, that's so good. I do think it's still helpful to be like, this is just going to be like a practice session. This is going to specifically be like, we're not trying to get to orgasm or whatever at all. We're really just like testing out some things. And I think like creating that container for learning and for exploring without like with very low stakes. I think that's what it is. It's like we're like really lowering the stakes to experiment. So I think that's so important. So if you're listening and you want to try something new, do a practice session with your partner.
So if you're curious about Beducated and you want to check it out, Mariah is offering all of you a 40% discount for being listeners of the show. So you can go to beducated.com and enter the code ASK, ASK. You'll get a free 24-hour trial, and then you'll get 40% off your annual membership. The link and code are also in the show notes if that is easier for you. And I'm excited to share this with you guys, and here's to learning. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Okay, so let's focus a little bit more on like the orgasm for people with a vulva. The video had some really helpful things to say. Obviously, I have some more of the psychological background on it, but I'm curious just from, owning this business and being a human on your own sexual journey for a while, like, what do you think people need to know about orgasm for vulva owners?
You already said it. Focus on the pleasure, not the orgasm, especially as a vulva owner. This is, I think, was for me the key learning when diving into the whole orgasm space, that, like creating simply more time to enjoy myself and breathing in and out, and not working towards that only goal, but simply sensing, okay, there's like a subtle type of pleasure. Like, let's see what would happen if I'm focusing on that little pleasure that's already there.
Yeah.
And then sort of kind of like in a meditation where you're focusing on breathing, you focus on that very sensation that you're already feeling, even if it's just a tiny, tiny sensation. Of course, it depends a little bit. If my partner is very quick in changing positions and doing something else, then of course the sensation might then suddenly be gone. Okay. And then you focus again on a different sensation. But for me, having that internal presence on more random sensations, I guess, than that very specific, peculiar sensation that I'm looking for when I'm, for example, self-pleasuring.
Right.
So when I'm self-pleasuring, I usually know more or less what I need to do to get myself off, or at least feel more relaxed or have an orgasm in the end. But when I'm with a partner, that's always a different scenario, because like they might not do what you would usually do. So focusing on sensations that are not the obvious, that where okay, this type of sensation will definitely take me to an orgasm, but kind of detach from that a little more and take a step back and actually focus maybe on a more random sensation.
Yeah.
That's not the most obvious pleasure sensation. And I feel like that, can somehow be an interesting inner play. Sometimes there's the more obvious pleasure sensation, sometimes the less obvious. And sort of dancing with those around a little is really a fun way, especially in terms of the vulva anatomy. I think we're still in the beginnings of science, of really understanding the full scope of the nerve network. I mean, just recently they discovered, okay, it's not 8,000, but 10,000. Like, who knows? Maybe it's 20,000. Like, like it's, you know, there's like I feel like it's still such a mystery for me when I realized I had a G-spot and I could squirt. Like, this was just a revelation of, wow, like, what is my body capable of? Like,
I know.
having these moments of revelations and discovering these different pleasure zones.
Yeah.
From your outer lips to the inner lips to a sort of entrance area of your vaginal canal to where entrance rings lie to going deeper into more the lower part of the clitoris, the G-spot, further down within sort of the vaginal canal. There's so many interesting points, like working towards your anus, which can be very pleasurable. Simply discovering it with fingers or a toy can be just an amazing journey. Actually, I had another really amazing thing which I can highly recommend everyone with a vulva to do.
Okay.
And the next time you are at your gynecologist, if you're feeling comfortable, I think you're using a different term than a gynecologist in the US.
Gynecologist.
Yeah. Okay.
Same.
So when you're there, like, ask them kindly if they could show you your cervix. Because what they're doing, they have the speculum, and the speculum is to get like a probe of your cervical lubrication. They do the pap smear and all types of different tests there. So with the curriculum, they can sort of open that a tiny bit, and you can also bring a mirror in case they don't have a mirror. So let them open it a little bit and have a look at your cervix. It's
interesting.
Incredible. Just having a deep look inside, because I feel like for a penis owner, they can always have a look at their penis easily.
I know.
Right? And for yourself, like, I'm noticing the difference between my boy and my daughter. I mean, she sometimes accidentally touches her vulva, but it's really accidentally.
Okay.
And my boy is like constantly playing with it, you know, because it's just there. He already has such a like extroverted connection already, or quite intense connection, just because of that the genitals are outside of his body.
Right.
And for a vulva owner, it's of course deeper inward. It's like more hidden. It's almost like you need to accidentally touch it to realize, oh, there's something there. I felt like that eureka that I had looking at my cervix, even though it's a little complicated with the speculum and all that. But yeah, it's just something quite magnificent, I think. You can actually buy the speculum yourself, but I would definitely recommend to let your gynecologist do it. It's anyway very good to go to the gynecologist. I have the feeling in a lot of countries it's not mandatory. Like in Germany, they sort of tell you like you need to go once a year at least and have like really yearly checks. So it's like a more common thing to do, whereas in other countries it's not that common, or you go if you really are in super strong pain, and that's already too late then, in my opinion.
That's a good point. I mean, go if you are in pain, go, but like in the US they changed it, so instead of having an annual exam and pap smear, it's only every 3 years that insurance will cover it now. And so you're right, it makes me think a little bit, or it's like, are we going to be less connected to our bodies? And I think most women in the US, you know, I don't know if I would say dread. I think some people dread going to the gynecologist. Some people are just like, it's not fun. But it's nice to hear your enthusiasm, actually, because, you know, what if it is a way to get to know your body better? And, you know, like Mariah was saying, maybe it's not always like at a gynecologist's office with a speculum, but maybe you at least have a mirror and look at your vulva and locate your clitoris and your clitoral hood and your inner and outer labia.
That's a great starting point. Yeah.
And you can ask your gynecologist that too, because I'm thinking even like, does everyone know, you know, where their clitoris is and their clitoral hood? And also I feel like I should say the clitoris is actually everywhere. it's like
Yeah.
not literally everywhere, but throughout the vulva. It's not just like the head of the clitoris or the glands.
It's not just the button.
It's not just the button or the pearl, you guys. It's underneath too. It's like in there behind the skin of the vulva. So, but yeah, I love that. Your course covered that too. And so I hear what you're saying. Like, I just think it's so important for people to know their bodies. And I think to me, that's what's missing in the sex education that we do have is like, here's how to find your own clitoris. It's all of these like illustrations in books, but not as much like the personal knowledge, And so I do think that, grabbing a mirror
and relevant knowledge on really like the exploration part on this is how a professional would recommend you to self pleasure or what happens if you penetrate something, like you kind of, I remember as a small little girl, like somehow I was curious what would happen if I put my finger in there, but I didn't really know, was I allowed to, would I hurt myself? Or, nobody tells you that.
No.
And even though all kids already are sexual beings, like they already have in a way.
Right. I agree with you. I don't know if everyone does.
Yeah, but they definitely have. I definitely see it on my own kids. Like there is like a certain pleasure that they already experience with their bodies and explore at least their own bodies in a way.
Right.
If I'm not telling my daughter anything about it, she's gonna be completely blank. And
true.
Yeah, that's definitely not a great start for her future sex exploration. So,
can we talk about that for a second? Like, how do you work with your kids around sexuality? Just like, being the owner of a sex education company and having relatively small kids, like, what does that look like?
My son, he's 4 years old now, and my daughter's 1.5, so it's still quite early.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And in her case, she's not speaking yet, so there isn't a lot that I'm like educating her or educating her about.
Yeah.
With my son, it's more in the day-to-day life, like natural things. Like, for example, I was on my period and he came into the bathroom and I was just changing, the pads and he was seeing the blood.
Okay.
And I was like, hey, do you want to have a look? Like, do you know what this is? And he was like, yeah, why do you bleed? Like, what happens there? And I'm like, yeah, like I'm menstruating and I'm letting go of an egg and it's sort of shedding and, sort of in simple words, explaining him a little bit something about the menstruation. And he was like, just okay. And then he left. So not really laughing or just taking it in as like
that's just
another very normal information, right?
I'm going to go play now.
Exactly.
Right. That was enough of you.
Exactly. Yeah. And so since then, like he wouldn't wonder, if mommy needs to change or if she's bleeding from her vulva. It's just like a natural thing. Once per month, this is what happens.
Right.
And I felt like that was like putting him on track of, making menstruation, destigmatizing it, making it a normal thing, and especially educating boys as well about it. And that was sort of like one example that came to mind. If he would, for example, ever ask me, what did you and Papa do? Like sort of if there were some more sex curious questions, I think I would try to really answer him the same way I showed him about the menstruation, like normalizing it in simple words, not saying, oh no, you're not allowed to ask it or making it a taboo, but simply answering it in the same way how he asked. Like,
I love that.
Just a simple answer to the question you ask. And of course, you might say, yeah, but then he's telling all the kids in the kindergarten about it. And like, of course that might happen. But I think if it's like such a normal thing, he won't even make a big deal out of it because it's just ingrained in his system that it's not like, such a taboo. Of course, it's anyways
Right.
coming once they're getting older. I'm very sure, like, I will be the most weird mom, and who knows, like, just
all the kids will want to
he's
ask you the
probably not gonna
questions.
want to talk about it, I'm sure, but
You never know.
I think it's like a natural transition into that topic without having a whole like around it. So
Right. I like
yeah.
that idea where it's just like, it's normal, it's matter of fact. There's, not even kind of an awareness that like other people might think this is taboo. That's kind of the vision that I hold.
I mean, it's so much. You can do so much, but of course there's still the societal taboo that I'm not able to control. And of course, like, Beducated is one project to minimize that more and more on a global scale. But it's like he will also have, as myself and everyone else, the challenge of breaking the taboo every day. If I want to learn something about my sex life, or want to try something new, or just want to get off in a nice way, or whatever.
It is lovely talking to you and other people who do this kind of work, because it helps me envision, like, what if the world was like this? Like, what if the world was, one where we know our bodies, we're comfortable with our bodies, we're comfortable talking about sex with, our children in a developmentally appropriate way. We can experience pleasure. It's not like a weird thing to even like bring up. I just feel excited, like, imagining that a little bit.
Yeah. You know what? I had this amazing moment, with the Gen Z generation. They quite more natural sex positive, I'd say.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
I've went to this party a couple of weeks back. My brother, he's like borderline Gen Z,
Okay.
like still old Gen Z, and he was DJing there. So when I entered the club, so like there were all these like 21-year-old teenagers running around, young adolescents running around, and there was this one person at the entrance, and they told me, "Hello, I'm part of the awareness team, and we make sure that you have a space in case you feel sexually insecure, or someone is overstepping your boundaries, or if you have the feeling you got drugged, or please let us know. We are at this place." So they were raising awareness for consent, and of course also around drugs, which is a relevant topic for the clubbing scene.
Right.
But also having this sexual mindset of like, hey, like, there's open dating happening for sure. And if you feel like you need support, if someone is sexually assaulting you, let us know, like, we're there. So I felt like, wow, like, that was definitely not happening in a time when I went clubbing. So there is something happening.
It's encouraging.
Maybe, I don't know if it was like an example. Maybe it's not everywhere like this, but
I recently
it gave
heard
me
of
hope
too. Yeah, I there was a restaurant here, or a bar where I live, and somebody posted it in Facebook that in the women's bathroom on the stalls, they had like a little sheet that I wish I could give them a shout out. I forget the name of it, but it was like, if you're on a date, or if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're being pressured, if you're, kind of not here consensually, they gave people code words. They were like, say this word and we'll call you like a taxi or an Uber, or like, say this word and we'll like escort you there. And I was like, oh my God. And it was just like such care and concern for like safety and stuff. So it is encouraging. It's nice that so many people want to create not only a safe world, but a pleasurable world.
Yeah. And I think like if you could see that in schools and, in all types of institutions, at work, like, I mean, sex positivity is relevant not just in the bedroom, but beyond that, at our employee, like employers, they like institutions, laws, they like, ideally that would be, of course, a utopian world, but it's a world that I'm definitely working towards, and hoping that we can sort of inspire as many people as we can to join, and of course recommend the work that you do, that we do. And I think word of mouth is just a very powerful tool in that sense, to raise awareness and make people aware that there's another way. And we don't have to live with that taboo.
I could not agree more. And so I do think one of the things people can do is to check out Beducated and start educating themselves. So where can they find you? And we will be putting a link, and I think you have a special offer for our audience as well.
You're welcome to check us out at beducated.com. Maybe you do the spelling. I'm not so good at that. But
the link will be in it's like the word educated, but with a B in front. So beducated.com.
You will find a whole platform from tantra massage to kink to everything in between for singles as well as couples, for any sexual orientation.
I just checked and they're giving you guys a very nice discount of 40% off. So I highly recommend taking advantage of that.
Yeah, so that's on the yearly pass that we're offering 40%. I think it's a great deal because you can you don't have stress to check everything out, over the weekend. You can, take your time, take the courses every couple of weeks or so.
Right.
Maybe there's something happening in your relationship and you want to try something new. So it's just kind of like a nice companion on the side. I also think it's great we're offering a free trial. So that means you can actually check it out for 24 hours.
Oh, that's nice.
And only then the credit card is being charged. So there's a way for you to kind of tap your toes in and see if it's really a fit for you.
Right.
I'm looking forward to maybe having one of your future online courses at Beducated. Who knows?
I would love that too. Wouldn't that be fun, you guys? So anyways, I just want to thank you so much for being here and honestly for the work that you do. And I think it's very cool that you've been doing this for a while, and they have a beautiful platform. The website's beautifully designed and, it comes through in the quality of what you've created. So thank you. We're excited to be connected with you guys. I'm excited to hear from any listeners who check it out. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mariah.
Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Heather.